Recording in progress.
Good evening. Today is. That's okay.
Where is it coming from?
It's somewhere over there. Good evening. That sounds better. I don't hear it. Oh, you can hear it. I can't hear it. I didn't hear it that time. Today is Monday, March 20th, 2023, and this is the Historic Preservation Commission, and we will have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Beauchamp.
Here.
Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Dunlap.
Here.
Commissioner Berg.
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Dahlia.
Here.
Chair Haley.
Here. And looking at our agenda for tonight, any changes or a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I second that motion.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
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 And then looking at our minutes from our last meeting, February 27th, 2023, if there's any changes that would like to be noted for that?
I would move we approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any public comments that are not, for items that are not on our agenda this evening? And we don't see any, and there's none online. Is there any?
We have 3 attendees online. None of them have their hands raised.
All right, thank you. And as far as our public, also we have Monarch High Schoolers here today, so welcome. Hope you enjoy our meeting. And we'll start with our public hearing for 1033 Jefferson Avenue. We'll have a staff presentation.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Okay, so tonight's public hearing item is a demolition request for 1033 Jefferson Avenue. This would be a request to demolish the existing structure at that property, and the garage and the house are all one structure, but the idea is to take them all down. So here's just a quick look at the general location of the property. Here it is in the Old Town overlay over there on the right, and then sort of a closer view on the left. So this property actually has a number of historic photos, kind of not as common for some of our structures in Louisville. So the top left is from around 1909. The bottom left is from 1948, and then that middle picture is from 1977. And then over on the right, you have sort of 2 different footprints, floor plans, so you can kind of see the difference between 1948 and then 1977, some of the additions and the garages that started to be built off the back of the house. This is just to kind of give you an idea of what the property looks like today. So that street view from the south is on the left, and then my terrible picture-taking skills, I apologize, but this is what the north elevation looks like on the property. So you can see that garage that's shown in that 1977 assessor's photo, and that side of the house as well. And then, you know, just to give you a sense of the additions and kind of what the house looks like on the property today, so that top photo gives you the closest to the street, and then you can kind of see that's probably closest to the historic form, right, of the property. And then moving backwards deeper into the property, you can kind of see that it sort of wends its way back in little squares to various attachments that are on the property. And it's a pretty large lot, so there are several different kind of just almost like snake-like little additions on the property. So here's a lot of pictures just trying to show you all the changes over time in one slide. And in your staff report and also in Bridget Bacon's report, you read that this is a national style. I would say that's probably the basic form. And then there's been a number of different ornamentation changes over time. I'm happy to talk more about the national form, but it's one of those that kind of crops up fairly frequently in Louisville. It's sort of a folk structure and can take lots of different forms. So immediately to the eye, you might not notice something super distinct, but it's one of our common forms here. The original roof pitch and the form of that front part of the house looks like it's maintained largely from 1907, just using the historic photographs. And then you can see in 1945, there's some additional changes to the front porch columns, and then there's additional gable that's maintained in 1977. But then again, we have another shift in the form and sort of the ornamentation and even the structure between 1948 and 1977. And then, as I noted, a lot of those rear additions that I kind of described before, looks like those are mostly from the 70s and 80s. And I wanted to clarify something in the staff report. Staff wrote that this didn't appear to maintain a high level of integrity, but then went on to describe all the ways that it did and did not. So I just wanted to note that the high level integrity piece is usually, I think, a phrase that we use when we mean like, that looks pretty darn close to what it looked like in our historic photographs, and that's not the case here. But it doesn't mean it's completely changed. It just means it's not hitting that sort of level that we typically describe as a high level of integrity. So just because I believe this is the first demolition review for the new commission, I am actually going to read these out. I don't usually. But so the purpose of a demolition review, and this is all pulled from the code, is to prevent the loss of buildings that may have historic and architectural significance and provide the time necessary to initiate designation as an individual landmark or to consider alternatives for the building. And the review criteria are the eligibility of the building for designation as an individual landmark, so that relates to age, significance, integrity, which were sort of broken out in the staff report. Then we have this criteria, the relationship of the building as a potential contributing structure to a potential historical district, which is we don't have any historic districts in Louisville, but it is always an option, so we always keep it as part of the criteria. And we also have the reasonable condition of the building and the reasonable projected cost of restoration or repair. So to take you through mostly that first criteria, with the first criterion with several criteria within it, the age of the structure is certainly beyond 50 years, approximately 118 years old. And then the significance of the house has an association with lots of different sort of smaller scale economic histories, I would say, but it speaks to, or at least it has a history that's associated with this white collar, more professional history of Louisville, which is not as common when we talk about coal mining. We're usually talking about actual coal miners, and in this case is predominantly engineers who are employed by the coal industries, and then a whole list, which you can read at great length, and I'm sure you have, in the report provided by the museum. So then in terms of integrity, it does appear to maintain its original location and setting, like many structures, and then that front footprint appears to be maintained potentially even since that 1907 photograph. The porch form, sort of a form maybe maintained since the original, but siding, a lot of the detailing, and even some of the structural elements of the columns has changed several times. And then, of course, the rear additions, we've already described those that have sort of changed the footprint of the house. And then the property condition and cost estimates are unknown, meaning that they weren't supplied by the applicant at the time of the application, but the applicant is here, and I'm sure we'll have a presentation. So if that's of interest, it's something to direct toward the applicant. Also just wanted to note that staff did receive 2 public comments via email. These were between the time when the packet went out and then today, this afternoon. So I've just tried my best to give a quick summary for those who didn't get the chance to see what the top level, concerns or sort of, opportunities or what have you, right? So here's a description, conversation about, a desire to limit construction noise for new construction, concern over the character of what would be built there, discussion about the impact of, the carbon impact of demolishing a structure, neighborhood fabric, something that came up, and then demolition's role in potentially widening economic gaps. So those are the topics that were covered. Staff also received a letter from the homeowner, again in that same gap, just a couple of days ago, in which the homeowner described, general interest in being a part of the historic Old Town area, and the intent to have the new house keeping with the historic architecture and to minimize the construction impact on neighbors. So the HBC may release the permit or place a stay on the application for up to 180 days. The date of the application was February 13th, so if the commission chose to put the full 6-month stay on there, it would expire on August 12th. couple of things to note about that. It does not start tonight if you were to place a stay. It starts at the time of the application, so that's where that 180 days actually maxes out. And then you do actually have the option as a commission to select periods that are between release tonight and 180 days. You don't have, it's not one or the other. And then staff recommends that the HPC release the demolition request. I went into this in detail in the staff report. Basically, all of the things that we'd look to do in a stay, staff feels that we've already accomplished. But I'm happy to answer more questions about that and direct some of those questions about interest in the program to the applicant as well. That is all of my presentation. Happy for questions.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have questions for staff specifically? All right, thank you. And is the applicant themselves are not here, but is there someone
Sorry, the
representing?
homeowner's not here, but the applicant is. Yep.
Okay. And so the applicant can come forward, just make sure you state your name and address for the record.
My name is Andy Johnson. I'm with DAJ Design at 922A Main Street. I also live at 920 Lincoln Avenue. I was asked to add that in since I'm an Old Town resident as well. Okay, how about that? All right, there we go. Do you want me to repeat? Okay. My name's Andy Johnson. I'm with DAJ Design at 922A Main Street. I also live at 920 Lincoln Avenue, right in Old Town. So I don't know how much we really need to talk about the home. I can give you a little bit of color on the home in terms of what I observed. I, of course, look at these homes with my clients. I've seen so many in Old Town, and at first glance, besides all the alterations that happened around mid-century, from a historic preservation perspective, it's a pretty far cry from its original design. And if I were to go for a historic preservation landmark designation, I would want to go to the original design, and I think it would be a lot of recreation. It's not to say we haven't done that in the past. However, I think with a more critical eye moving forward with landmark, I think that this is a very hard sell. Going inside the house, it is unrecognizable in terms of the original home versus all the remodel-itis that has happened. And this house has a very good case of it. The telltale is always looking up from down in the crawl space and in the basement. And it is very, very difficult to see original structure versus new. There's a lot of new lumber, presumably mid-century. It's hard to see the old rough sawn lumber that I would typically see. So anyway, I think staff did a wonderful job representing this. I do want to make a comment, though, in terms of the email that you probably received in your packet, maybe was forwarded to you by the neighbor next door, also a local architect, Peter Stewart. Both had great comments. I'll address the neighbor's comments in a little bit, but Peter and I have known each other a long time, and we ended up having a nice phone call after that email was also forwarded to me. And I think that Peter and I are very aligned on the historic preservation program and also synergies that can happen with the Louisville Sustainability Advisory Board. And I think that we're in an era now that we can't look at these things independently. So as we consider the historic preservation program, as we consider the Old Town overlay, I think that we have a new lens to look at all of these programs that we have within the city. And I think historic preservation has a great opportunity to kind of go beyond that, forgive me for this word, but kind of that little bit more myopic view of just preservation and really look at preservation's role in sustainability as well. So I promised Peter, since he couldn't be here tonight, that I would represent his email a little bit more in detail. So, the slides that he showed are maybe a little bit broader in context for the discussion. These are probably a little bit more appropriate for bigger buildings, but I think the point being with this, oh, actually, you're not even seeing my slides. Where?
Drag it all the way over so that we're a separate screen. Somebody, let me give it a shot. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so here you go.
Oh, cool.
And keep it over there.
Okay. Okay, how'd you do that?
Use the scroll on the mouse. Let me try one more time. Sorry.
That's what happens when you go over 50. You
Okay,
need
so
help
here,
with this.
watch. This guy right here, scroll him down like that, or forward if you want to go back.
Okay, stay up here. Okay, there we go. Oh, wait. Holy smokes, sorry guys. Okay, so anyway, I thought this slide was really great in that you save one home and you have all this energy behind, or you have this one home being built and you have all this energy behind it. And honestly, one of my arguments against this home in particular for a demo review is that we do the same thing a lot of times with historic preservation. If you ever come to some of the job sites that we've kind of unraveled the mummy on these homes, I mean, we end up with the new home. And I sometimes wonder, like, what we're doing in terms of that energy that we put into preserving the home. I think there are a lot of really good cases where we do a good job of preserving the structure, but there are a lot of cases where when we recreate history and we end up, with a shell of a home, that I think we need to look at this with a more critical eye in terms of what we approve for landmark and alteration certificates. So anyway, I hope I'm probably belaboring the point. The quote, I think, is relevant in terms of addressing the issues that were brought up, getting to the neighbors' comments. So the intent with my client's project is that they do want to do a single level home. We will do a finished basement to help build in square footage to the home without having a large impact on the neighborhood. There will be a buffer to the neighbors. This is a huge property, which is really great to have within the Old Town fabric because most of the properties are half this size. So we're able to have buffering to the neighbors with design landscaping appropriate for the home and the neighborhood. We'll be doing a detached garage. It will be a zero energy home. And I think, relative to some of the comments around context of the neighborhood, this is something that, is a subjective discussion, but something that we spend a lot of time in our office talking about. How do we have a street presence? How do we address the neighborhood's context and the cadence of the neighborhood as you walk along? It's really harsh when you have that two-story kind of presence in a new building form right in the middle of a whole bunch of one-story homes. And so it's this really tough balance of contemporary living standards of bigger homes and working into the existing neighborhood. So to the degree that we've been successful, of course, that is highly subjective, but it is something that we do spend a lot of time in our office talking about for our Old Town work. And then, of course, any contractor that we bring into the project, they do a very good job of obeying their noise ordinances as well as reaching out to the neighborhood for construction coordination. So anyway, with that, I'll end. I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you for your time, and looking forward to seeing what we do on this property.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
You mentioned it's a really huge property. What would be the current square footage, and do they have a estimated square footage of the replacement house at
No.
this point?
We have not begun design yet. I do have a full zoning report that I can share with staff that could be passed on to you, but
You have what?
a full zoning report showing
zoning.
maximum allowable sizes.
And what is that?
I don't remember. Yeah, I could look it up, but I don't remember offhand, Gary, sorry.
Maybe millionaires. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, and any public comments? I don't see any online. And then for the record, we did have the emails that came in from, I guess you already said that, but we'll just, for the record, for public comment as well. All right. So you
And,
will-
and I know you looked online, but maybe we can announce, sometimes they're a little slower to react. If any of, there's 3 online, if any of them want to make a public comment, you will need to raise your hand through Zoom, and then we can recognize you. So just wanted to give them just a second.
Sure, that's great.
And I'm not seeing any, but just wanted to make sure.
Yep,
Thanks.
thank you. All right, so we'll bring it back for discussion with the commission.
I'll speak a little bit about this. I'm a local architect as well, and I struggle with these projects. Having not been inside the home and understanding what the significant changes have happened, just looking at the massing on the exterior, as mentioned, the original front portion of the house, as far as the massing, appears to be in pretty good shape and original. It's evident that the articulation of the front porch has changed, although it is in great condition, it appears. But there is that struggle on, trying to maintain and keep these original structures and understanding of the homeowner's rights to build something new and to their current standards. So I think it is difficult. This is a very unique lot. As mentioned, it's fairly large. So I guess I'd like to get everyone else's opinion on, kind of that balance of, trying to keep homes like this or releasing them and hopefully seeing something come of it. Andy, you mentioned you haven't started design yet, but I'm very familiar with your work in town, and I appreciate it. I think you do a great job. Do you have thoughts on or ideas on what the new exterior style? Is it going to be more traditional, like an old town, or is it going to be more like your more contemporary, modern styles?
I honestly don't know yet. We are really at the very beginning. We haven't even finalized the programming of the home yet. Gone through inspiration images, had those final discussions. I would say that in general, people don't generally come to me for my traditional work. Mostly because my portfolio largely online is a little bit more of the contemporary stuff. But, I think that it's, I mean, you know this, Marty, probably as well as anybody, is that when you talk about style, you can really get hung up in the language. And, for me, it's really not about the style as much as it is about the massing and scale of how does the house present itself to the street? How does it fit within the context of the neighborhood, Old Town? And, I oftentimes talk about it as the cadence of the neighborhood. What does it feel like when you're driving by or riding your bike or walking by, and how does it feel? Does it jar? Is it jarring? Is it looming, or does it blend? Is it push back? So hard to tell. I think with the goals with these clients, they want a one-story home. This is going to be a smaller home in general from what they live in Indian Peaks East. That's always relative in terms of what the expectations are, but the goal is one story with a lot of landscape buffer. They do not want to fill that site up. They want buffer from the neighborhood. They want outdoor spaces. And they're willing to explore basement opportunities for additional bedrooms, rec room, those kind of spaces. So, these are all things that we do in Old Town, and utilize the tools of, subterranean spaces with, large window wells to kind of expand the home without having to always go up. So.
Thank you.
I guess too, since you're up here, I guess, can you walk us through kind of the exploration? Sounds like staff did talk about the landmarking and, addition and all that. Can you just kind of walk us through your clients' kind of thinking as far as what obstacles there are as far as keeping the original and just taking the additions off the back and just adding the space they need in a new space on the back, even in a one-story with a basement, all that, if it's a large lot?
Well, we first of all, we did get the asbestos report back, and which was fun. It's going to be completely gutted on the interior. Hard to say what that'll reveal. I think that upon touring the home, it's really hard to know what could be saved, because so much of what would have been the original architecture in terms of bearing walls, anything that would have supported, for example, this image, are gone. And honestly, the roof that's there now is not that roof for the front porch. That was all rebuilt. And the addition in the back really kind of engulfs the entire back of the home. Lots of different cobbled foundations. So I think the challenges would be, first, structural, second, the asbestos component. And then I think, to be honest, it's just not a pretty building like it used to be. There's a lot of recreation that would have to happen to get it to match, the window openings, the siding, the roof, and massing. So, even the chimney, that's on the driveway side, is not original to this home. And, it's not in commission anymore. It doesn't really function. So I think the undoing of the home is a big obstacle for them.
Thank you.
I went through all of the materials submitted and appreciate both the applicants and the owners' input into the points you made tonight and through the applications. And I think, as Marty said, you touch on a lot of the important points for me, but I think you've also touched on the tough points of preservation. And I thought staff did a nice job of balancing the other memos and notes that came from some of the neighbors, and I thought those were fairly represented. And frankly, I support staff's recommendation to release the demolition request.
Chair Haley, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know we're kind of
Right, we're,
non-traditional process, that's
Yep.
fine. I just wanted to say, if you do choose to have a staff closing statement, I just have one thing that I'd like to add before you start your formal discussion.
perfect, okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone have more questions for the applicant before we officially kind of move into our discussion? It's good, I'm glad you came back up, because I think we got more information. Sometimes any questions, we're not quite ready yet, so I think it's always good to be flexible, but. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're officially back into discussion. And do you want to give it now? Is that a good?
Yeah, if you don't mind, sorry. And
Sure, no.
I think however you want to run it, we could still be flexible. I just wanted to say that in the spirit of fairness and specificity of the criteria, just a reminder that the design of the house proposed is not even remotely within the HPC's purview. And that goes both ways. It's not something that you can use to, say, yeah, we can let this one go. And it's also, and because we believe that it will be built a certain way. But on the reverse, it's not something that you can use if you think, well, we really hate the way this is going to look. Let's hang out for a while and review the design with them. It's really meant to be about the existing structure. So I know we all know that, but I just wanted to add that to the record.
No, that's a really good reminder. And I was going to bring that up as well, so thank you. So that's perfect, yes.
So in looking at the existing structure, and even, I think the picture is really helpful to see the modifications that have been made since it was originally built 118 years ago. Some of those, so it doesn't look the same. It's that national style from so long ago, which there are some of in Louisville, and I don't know that many have been maintained in full integrity in Louisville. Some of the renovations to the porch, to the other additions, would now be considered within that 50 years time frame. That being said, they don't necessarily fit into architectural styles that are recognizable. So, I think the work could potentially be done on the exterior if there was the will to do it, to bring it back to a historic look. Where I sort of get hung up is the interior and what it would take to do that, and hearing that there's load-bearing walls that really aren't recognizable, with the footprint. That so many other components would have to be changed to bring it back to an original style. These are things to think about. If we could get it back to that, if there was a will to do that. It sounds like the applicants and owners have gone through with staff the different grants that would be available, the different incentives. So I think these are just things that I'm thinking about. There's the possibility to do this work, but maybe sounds like not the inclination to do that right now.
I was just gonna say, as far as the interior and bearing walls and the such, I mean, there's something to be said for something that's been standing for a certain amount of time, and if it's still there and something works, it works. I wouldn't lean so much on that one for myself. I do look at the porch, and it has been rebuilt at one time, if not a couple times in there. Windows have been changed on the front, sides, siding's different, chimneys are different. There's some elements there that really, for me, I can see in the photos, I can see as we travel through time. The one, figure 2, almost seems like it's not even the same place. I had to double check on that one multiple times with the porch. I would say, however, if somebody were to come in and say, we want to landmark this and preserve it, it's not that far off either. I mean, it's not drastically far off. The front massing and everything else is pretty much there. I don't know that without having a historic district that we have a huge, in my opinion anyways, have a huge leg to stand on as far as, denying it, in my opinion. If they were to come in and ask for funds to restore it, it would be my preference, just because you do look at the postcard, gives me pause as far as being a really historic element and one of those 4 pictures that come, or 4 homes that come into that picture. And just having some of that history there. Also looking at the neighboring structures, there's 2 that are currently historic landmarks that are adjacent to it. That whole neighborhood, if you do the Google fly-through, does seem to really support what's there. And I just don't know without having, again, a historic district that we can, that in my opinion, that I could say no to it at this point is where I would lean. It's interesting to hear everybody else's commentary, so that's why I wouldn't say what I'm going to say for sure yet, because I want to hear everybody discuss. But those are some things I look at. The porch is easily, reconstructed as something that would look historic, but again, then you get in that fine line of, is it historic, is it not? And anything that's been done since that time, a lot of times with setups like this, you do like to see the history and that it's not of that time, well then you just, make a major move to make it not at that time. It's unfortunate, it would be my preference for sure to see this one apply and have some funds that we're able to put towards it and retain that front portion with, anything else that goes on inside of there. As far as asbestos, that's something we're gonna deal with on every building that you go through, and just the construction that's gone through time. I mean, you still have stuff from the 80s and 90s that it shows up in. That one is just a little bit of, we just didn't know what we didn't know way back when. So I think regardless which way this house goes, that would have to be dealt with. So that's something I would totally put off to the side. But those are my 2 cents.
I was also struck by the postcard advertisement, and I think as far as like the fabric of the neighborhood, like I think this little section has just strong like continuity in the street. So I think, yeah, I think for me, like it has the 50 years or older, it has the strong social history and just that historical documentation of like the advertisement of like how Louisville was growing and becoming. And so I think the hang up is really the porch and like windows and stuff. I don't feel like that's a strong reason to let it go necessarily. I think if it were, like you said, if it were flipped and they were coming for landmarking, I think we would be pretty open to saying, yeah, this could definitely be restored or has significance. So that's where I'm also, and the asbestos also doesn't really deter me too much. So it's a hard one for me. Yeah.
I agree. I think the house looks like it should be in that neighborhood. It's come from that neighborhood. It's going to have some changes after 118 years. Porch floors, porch roofs are going to be traded out, but basically it's intact. But I'm concerned we don't have ultimate power to say you can't do this. We have some persuasive powers, I guess, but it almost sounds like it doesn't sound like there's been much effort to think about preserving that house. That it's like, well, no. I like the letter from the homeowner. They say they want to take great care to plan for how the new house is in keeping with the traditional architecture of Old Town. Well, that's great. But it isn't clear. I guess if we were to approve this path, the demolition and the new house, we don't really have any guarantee that that would happen at all. I guess I'm also a little concerned that this is the second house recently where asbestos has been brought up. I guess you probably have some experience, Keith, as if you ran into that. I didn't in my house. And so I guess it'd be nice to know the degree of the problem with that. If somebody says asbestos, does that mean, oh, well, there's really no use pursuing landmarking this house unless it's a major change out like the one that we currently have on Jefferson. I guess maybe in the future we should get some way of evaluating how important the asbestos card is.
Asbestos has to be mitigated even for
Either way,
demolition too,
yeah.
right? So it's regardless of demolition or.
But it's degree. There
Right.
might be asbestos in a paint, as there was in that other house, or it might have been a concrete siding that had a great deal of asbestos in it. Or, as a layman, I guess I would say that that's my view.
I would just say that typically with stuff like this, asbestos, again, is if it's not airborne and it's sealed and contained, it's really is what it is. So if you're going to be getting into walls and rearranging, coming up to current codes, you're going to start digging into it a little bit. So essentially, I would say typically you would end up having to take all the drywall off to be able to get at anything behind it. At that point, you have it tested in certain areas that are typical of each material and throughout the house. And then when they come up with their report, you have to go through, and the state of Colorado, you had to have a remediation company come through, take care of stuff, encapsulate it, take it out the way that they're supposed to. It depends on how hot it is. And then you go through and clear it to a certain level and then move forward. So that's kind of the process.
Call it to Aurora.
Yeah. So, anyways, just as far as I understand most of that.
Yeah, I think too, like the fact that there hasn't been a lot of just plans as far as what they're gonna do. Like I feel like there hasn't been plans of like what could be done either. So that's where I feel like this day could be just an opportunity to look at a little closer and just have some more time for maybe inspiration or different ideas. I just feel like there's a lot of time and room right now for planning, and that could be a piece that they could just incorporate into the plan they're gonna do regardless. It's just, let's just compare it and see what could be done and what it looks like. And it sounds like they are invested in Old Town and what it looks like and feels like and all that. And so just really showing that that's important to Louisville, it's important to our commission, and here's a little extra time to do that. But
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I agree with Linda that the character is very important to me because I live on that street about 2 blocks away. So being a commission member and a resident, I'd like to see the character maintained in that neighborhood. So I like the fact that they're only going to do a single-story house. However, there's no guarantee that that's actually what will be built. But I do like Andy's designs, and he does do tasteful design, so that comforts me a little bit. So hopefully they'll keep the house close to what it was, or in the same tradition.
or questions or?
I mean, I'm a little bit, obviously being one of the new commissioners, I'm new to the process a bit, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand what we should be weighing in on and what we shouldn't be weighing in on. And, I think the presentation's been nice. It's been nice to get the history. It's nice to hear from the applicant. I can appreciate all that sort of information. I do lean a little bit on the recommendations of, Amelia, and I could see this having some sort of stay if somebody had wanted one, just to look at exploration of trying to see what we could provide for funds to retain something of this sort. I don't know if I'd really fight everybody on this one if that's the way what they wanted to go as well. Again, I'm a little bit relying on everybody else's experience and expertise and trying to just weigh in on things that I've thought about throughout this process.
No, I think you're right, though, that this is one of the more frustrating problems we have, is that we don't have a legislative ability to stop this, other than to try to be persuasive and think of things that can be done. I wish we had an easy way to say, just do this and make it right.
It's more like that we have a certain set of tools in our tool belt. That's it. Yeah.
Right, and so the stay is really, because we're not, we don't have the authority to decide, like it's up to the homeowner in the end. And so the stay is really, we always stress it's not punitive, it's just a time to explore all options. And for the past couple years, we haven't had architects on our commission, so that's another benefit of this time, is just to kind of have that resource if an applicant wants to like have someone else kind of look at it or talk it through it, just kind of what's plausible. Yeah, and then the applicant could also explore if they, like, what would it look like to be landmarked? Would we, at this point, we haven't said like, yes, like we absolutely would landmark it, but they could come back and say, we would actually like to explore that. And if they did, then they could have the historical structural analysis, which would go through like all of the structural pieces of the home and give them and us a better understanding of what is actually involved in the restoration process or whatever. So, I mean, that's another piece of that 180-day stay, is just allowing more time for kind of all the resources that we offer. So, and at the end of the day, when the stay expires, it's up to the homeowner in the end. So, and we can also, this is for the 180-day stay, we have shortened the stays in the past as well for various reasons. So that's also an option that we can, so, yeah.
In the past, when you've put a stay on, whether it's 30 days or 180 days, have you ever seen where you're able to change directions?
We had a really good success story just recently, and we've had previous ones too, where they come back with a different design or a different idea, or move the building. I mean, we've had a house moved, and so I would say it's not a slam dunk that it always turns out in our favor, but for sure we've had really good success with having that 180-day stay. So.
Part of the prior discussion was about the framework of the existing house, the strength of it structurally. And so doing the historic structure assessment could be a good thing to really understand what it would take to preserve the front part of the building as is. That does take some time.
I'm a little intrigued that the applicant is desiring a one-level home. Typically in these Old Town lot, they're trying to maximize square footage, and they end up wanting 2 stories, and adding a 2-story to, you know, a 1-story original historic home is a challenge. And typically, in my opinion, I don't see too many successful projects where you've got a 2-story addition on a historic piece on the front. But so understanding that they want to do a 1-story, I'm intrigued that that could probably look pretty good and maintain the original structure up front.
And there's examples of successful homes that have done just that, whether it's a 2-story in the back or a 1-story in the back. Keith's is a good example of an addition. Yeah, so, I mean, there's,
Right.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing too, is it can be done, it has been done, it's been done well. And we've had homes with less integrity than this that have been landmarked and are possibly gonna be taken back at one point, but they haven't at this point, but they had much less integrity as far as things had been changed on it. So yeah. Yeah, this is a tricky one for you all's first one. This is a good introduction.
So just to be clear, if we put a 180-day stay on, the owner couldn't do anything before that 180 days. Given where this owner sounds like they are relative to the stage of the design, they don't even have a design. I mean, with or without a stay, they're going to have an ample opportunity of runway, I would think, to explore historic preservation options. I think given their applicant architect is familiar with our programs, I'm reasonably confident they would have an understanding of what the grant amounts would be, plus or minus, if they would go and come to this commission and ask for a grant. So I think they could factor that in, given where they are, with or without a stay of this commission, I would assume. Because, I mean, it's not like, it doesn't sound like their blueprint's ready to go break ground tomorrow on a new addition or a new deal. So, I don't know, I mean, maybe this is a question for Amelia. It sounded like, and maybe I'm remembering this from a different presentation, but the owners have been aware of our programs and what they offer and things like that.
Yeah, so to answer that question directly, in the future, I'm happy to add these into my reports. I try to keep them short, but I'm happy to give more description in the future. But yep, so at the site visit, I met with the homeowner and we walked through the entire house. I described the program, described some of the possibilities, as I saw them just off the cuff. And so, we talked about that. We've been in email contact. So she's aware of the benefits and potentially what that might mean, like the very general things of what might be supportable architecturally. However, again, I'm noting this again for the new folks, but there is a piece in the demolition review code that describes what the HPC can explore above and beyond what staff has any ability to mention or to talk about, right? So that's also a piece of the demolition review, the demolition stay, is that if the HPC is really invested, they can be a little more creative than what I can be, which is just like, here's the sort of standard approach, but.
Does anyone have any other kind of discussion parts or just questions or kind of?
But given what Amelia said, that there is an option to explore more, there is a possibility of performing the historic structure assessment. Maybe given that the start of the application was mid-February, a 90-day stay would take it out to mid-May and give time to do some of those things. It doesn't seem punitive.
I will say, if you look at the stay, and if truly this has not been into the design yet, I'm master planning, trying to figure out schematic design, layouts, other stuff. It's not like that's probably not going to go on in the meantime anyways, unless they would really like to pursue this portion. So I don't know if it's a huge lever or not. And I still have to try to figure out when is the appropriate time to pull that lever. So They could be.
There wouldn't be that much of a difference between May and August. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying as far as, you know, if you're really starting the design, your intent is to take it down regardless, you know, the stay might postpone things and cause some reconsidering, but of their, you know, actions, but I don't know how much it does. I'm kind of curious on that portion.
So, yeah, this is a tricky one for everybody's new commissioners, first one to consider. So I really appreciate everybody's thoughts on all of this. And I think it's, again, just really good to note that this particular part of Louisville is really one of many unique little stretches of neighborhood where the character is relatively well maintained because there's a fair number of preserved, you know, landmarked homes there, or if not landmarked, still preserved homes there. So, you know, it does fit several of our criteria with the social significance, you know, remaining in the same place, the style is still evident, although obviously changed. I would not be opposed to a stay if that's what the commission, you know, other commissioners were on board with. It would allow the owners and the applicant to, I think Amelia said well, to maybe go a little deeper, get a little more creative with some of the options that might be available to the owners, especially hearing from the owners themselves that they, again, are committed to a smaller sized home, a one-level home. You know, what's there could be, you know, could be workable. So I appreciate the architectural input. You know, we've heard from our architects on the commission that some of that, those structural pieces could be usable. So I would not be opposed to a stay. I don't know that 180-day stay would be necessary, however. So something, you know, taking into account the February date and kind of scaling that 180 days back would be preferable for me.
Does anyone else think the 90-day stay would be preferable to the 180, 180?
Yeah,
As far as,
I don't see any reason to go with a 180-day stay. I don't think that would gain us or the clients anything, really. I think 90 days would be more than enough to explore some other options if that's what they want to do. So I'd be in favor of the 90-day stay as well.
I'll just reiterate where I was. I wasn't in favor of any stay. I think there's going to be sort of a, as you mentioned, a little bit of a time delay just where they are in the process and where they are in the project. I think given the price of the house that they're buying and the property and what they're doing on this, I think we have to be sensitive to the owners and what they're trying to do along their timetable as well. I don't know that a 90-day stay is going to buy us anything, but frankly, I'm not in favor of any stay. 90 better than 180, though.
Recalling a property, I don't know, maybe a year ago that we did a 120-day stay. Not that we're, you know, trying to make this harder or more arduous for the owners, but it would, you know, give more time for consideration of plans and be able to work with staff and HPC a bit more. So that's not unprecedented for us to do a stay of 120 days either.
so we can make a motion of releasing the demolition. We could make a motion of putting a 180-day stay on this property, or a 90-day stay, or a 120-day stay. So we have a lot of options. I don't know if we're ready, if everyone kind of feels like they have a pretty solid opinion, or if we want to even just decide on what amount of stay we'd want to, and then we can decide if we want to vote on releasing or not, or. It's,
Why don't I start the bidding? I move that we
Sure.
release.
all right,
And if it doesn't pass, then we'll move up the ladder.
that's great.
Is there, I guess you should ask for a second.
All right, is there any seconds on that one?
All right, then I move for a 90-day stay.
Or are you gonna second it?
I was gonna second.
Okay.
Yep. No stay.
So he's seconding
Oh, I'm
the
sorry,
stay.
so we have a
Okay,
second.
All
Okay.
right, so all those in favor of releasing the permit?
Aye.
All right.
I'm sorry, do we have to do a voice vote, or can we?
Oh, yeah, I'm
No. Just for the record?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we'll do a
We
voice
can
vote.
do
I'm
it.
sorry.
I'm like, so like, whoa, this is exciting. But I
think we
forgot the
can't
roll
capture
call.
that
Yeah, we
without-
got
yeah,
the roll
sorry.
call. We'll
Okay.
do the roll call, sorry.
Okay, Commissioner Berg,
No, nay.
Commissioner Keller,
No, I think 180 is excessive, but I would like to try that option.
Commissioner Dahlia,
Yes?
Chair Haley,
No.
Commissioner Bosham,
No.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap.
No.
All right, so the next option would be someone for placing a stay on this property.
I would move that we place a 90-day stay on this demolition request.
Let's second that.
And we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Dahlia,
Yes?
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Chair Haley,
Yes.
Commissioner Bosham.
Yes.
All right. So we will, staff will be in touch as well. And then if any commissioners want to reach out, we can talk to Amelia if anyone wants to kind of be the point person for this property.
So just point of information, this is 90 days from the February 13th date?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, so it'll be May 13th-ish.
Yep, I'm happy to follow up. I'll start with you, Chair Haley, and then, try to do what you'd like to do, as described here. And just really quickly, Director Zucchero, can you read out the number of that motion that just passed?
Like the resolution number?
Do you have the the number, like, was it 4-2 or what?
Oh, I think it was 7-0.
It was 7-0 on the second one. Okay.
If I might speak just for a second, as a side note, it would be my preference, and I think that it would be, at least for myself, it would be looked on favorably for any sort of historic landmark and possible money to go along with refurbishing that front area and the front facade anyways in particular. Whether or not they choose to go that route, that is their choice, but I would encourage at least to think about it and look at it a little bit.
That's good feedback. And that's what that time is for. So, yeah, so we'll make sure that we pursue that. All right. Our next, so we're not going to flip those, is that correct?
No, they can stay that way.
Okay. So our next is discussion and direction for the Old Town Overlay Zone District. And this is an update. This will be a staff presentation.
Can we just take a 3-minute recess while I jack around with
Absolutely.
the computer? Thank you so much.
Yep.
Sorry.
No problem.
Recording stopped.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
All right, we're back from our recess.
Okay, thank you. I just really wanted to sit down, and I think it was probably a little more trouble than it was worth, but thank you for bearing with me. Okay, so the next item is we had it on the agenda as a discussion direction. It's going to be a little bit more of an update on the Old Town Overlay Zone District. So I'll go over kind of the goals of the presentation. Basically, kind of took stock and realized that, of course, we have 3 new commissioners, and also it's been over a year now since late 2021 since the commission had seen anything about the Old Town overlay, either the current or the update to that zoning. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to try to get a little bit back up to speed on this process. And then we'll also, be gathering some requests for information. What other things would you like to see that would help in your review of a potential or the draft, code update? And then also just to sort of gather some initial thoughts about the current zoning, questions that you have, directions that you're interested in us, potentially pursuing. But really, in short, we're trying to avoid presenting what the Old Town Overlay is and also asking you to comment on it all in the same hearing night. That's really what we're trying to avoid, because that doesn't seem fair. So then the next steps after this would be, staff will continue working on the draft ordinance for the Old Town Overlay with the consultants. There may be additional review steps in that process, but it certainly will come at least one more time before the HPC, Planning Commission, and City Council. And then just for you all to know, some of these are available tonight, and happy to put you in touch with them from here on out. They have minutes from the joint meeting between the Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm going to try to summarize those, but I'd really encourage everybody to actually read them. They're a really good way of getting up to speed if you didn't for tonight. We've got the diagnostic report from the consultants, and then also, it didn't include this, but I can hook you up with the council meeting minutes because they also had a conversation about this back in 2021. Okay, so what are we talking about? The Old Town Overlay. So you would have noticed earlier the demolition review had a little, overview of where the property was, and there was a star in it. That shape is the Old Town district, and so you can kind of see it here. It doesn't include downtown, and it sort of jogs a little bit. So that's sort of interesting, actually, and we can maybe talk about this or not, but it doesn't include some neighborhoods that are certainly within the historic, sort of older than 50 years, developments. Bella Vista to the south, for example, is not part of the Old Town overlay, but that kind of gives you a sense of where it is. And then the map on the left, that kind of shows you that it is an overlay on top of underlying zoning regulations, which basically means that anything that the overlay doesn't talk about, it sort of reverts back to that underlying zoning, which varies across the area.
Hey, Amelia, can I just add, I just want to add a little bit more background too in history. I think it must have been 2021, City Council initiated this project, which I know some of you know it, but I just wanted to reiterate it. That
There is some of that later, but
there is,
you can
okay.
hop on it now. It doesn't really matter.
I think it'll get some context for them early, yeah.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, sorry if I'm repeating, but, because there was concern about new construction, building additions and new buildings within Old Town, concern about scale and massing as it relates to historic character. We started that project with a consultant. I just wanted to say, it was delayed because of Marshall Fire, but we are getting a lot of momentum. We're re-engaging with the consultant and getting that project back up and running. So I just wanted to add that context to why we're here and why it's been so long.
Very helpful. So yeah, I've started with what is the Old Town Overlay, but that's a very, very critical and probably disorienting not to have had that earlier. So thanks, Rob. Okay, so current zoning for the Old Town Overlay, there are lots of pieces to this, and I went into greater detail in the staff report. You also have a copy of the Old Town Overlay, and what I'm going to try to do here is just give us some pieces to talk about, but if there are any questions about how these operate, we can get into a deeper dive, but I've done a really high level here. So In terms of anything that relates to the mass and scale of new construction, we kind of have three main categories that I was thinking of at least. One is the roof design. So there are roof pitch requirements. And so it's sort of hard to see in this, I apologize, but that's just an image I grabbed from the internet that sort of show you some of the different roof pitches. And we have I'll go into this a little bit in the next slide, but basically a baseline regulation that requires the pitch to be like at least 612 or above. There's some nuance in there, but that's one piece that governs the look, right, and then sort of indirectly the mass and scale. But that's sort of the real main architectural piece that we currently have in the code. Another piece, we have lot coverage and floor area ratio, and just a really brief description of what those two things are. Lot coverage is sort of that footprint of the building on the lot, so it's how much of the lot is being covered by the structures. It includes garages, sheds, covered porches. It's not always the case in all jurisdictions, but here in Louisville, includes all of those. And then the floor area ratio, some people call it FAR, some people call it FAR. That is really the square footage of the structure. And so over there you see there's 1, 2, and 3. So it's the second floor, the first floor, and then the garage. All of those would count toward the FAR, whether it's detached, attached, and there are definitions of that, or there's definition of that in the code. So that's where we draw it from. I'm sure some will tell you, myself included, it's not the most straightforward description, but we make it work. So a tiny bit more detail on those. The lot coverage and the FAR are based on the size of the lot. So you can kind of see there the sort of stepped coverage. So there are kind of 4 different sizes that sort of organize the way that, how much lot coverage you can have. And again, happy to get into more detail, but just so that you know, that's one of the basic tools. And then another thing, the setbacks piece, sort of represented by those orange arrows, that's width dependent. So that's also based on the size of the lot that you're working with, but just in a slightly different way. And then you can see there up on the top is the language, so you can get a sense of what that roof pitch requirement is. Doesn't mean all roofs have to be at 612, but there is a way we have to sort of do, calculation using a roof plan every time that somebody comes in with a new build or even an addition. So we have to weigh the addition, against what's there on the property existing. So that's a really quick primer, and I'm assuming that folks have read a little bit more. We can go into greater detail, but I just want to stop here. This is the Q&A 1 of 3, just to make sure we're all on as much of the same page as we can be. So what questions do you have about how the current zoning for lot coverage, FAR, setbacks work? Any questions right now about that piece? Okay. Okay, so now our heads are going to break. The density bonuses are another piece to this, and the way that you read it in the code, it's just a separate section, and it sort of is very much in conversation with those other pieces. So the setbacks, a property that would potentially be eligible for density bonus, it still has to meet setbacks and roof pitch. So they're in conversation, but I separated them here because I think they are related, but not the exact same thing, right? So density bonuses basically are that if you meet certain criteria, your property and your project is eligible for increased FAR, increased lot coverage. There are 2 different options basically to qualify. So one is preserving the front portion of the house. There is a definition of that in the code. And then the other is to landmark the property. And I kind of went into a little bit more detail in the staff report about there's some possibility, I think, the way the code's written and organized, for a little bit of confusion there. But I think the way that we interpret it and the way that it reads is the language, it's sort of a minimum qualification for a landmark to have to meet, must be at least 50 years old, must meet, preserve at least the front 10 feet. But really a landmark is meant to hit that alteration certificate criteria, which is a higher standard. But the way that it's written, I think there's a little bit of opportunity for confusion. And then just to note too, so this really wasn't part of your onboarding because it's not something that the HPC reviews. So you don't look at these and say, that looks like that preserves enough of the house so you can have a density bonus. At least currently, it's not how it's set up. So that's why this is sort of a new concept for you all. And then in terms of the staff, what research we've been doing, we've been taking a look at these density bonuses, and I'll get a little bit more into detail about what the consultants have found. But so far, it's been a little trickier than I had anticipated, but we're trying to figure out, how many properties have actually taken advantage of these incentives, and to what effect. I'd say so far it's a lower rate of adoption than I would have thought, but again, the way that our records work, it's a little tricky to kind of figure out, so it's still something we're working on. And then another thing, this is pretty uncommon in other jurisdictions. So that includes within Colorado and then nationwide. It's not completely unheard of to have a type of density bonus, but it's really not something that's super common in the toolkit. And we can talk about that more as well, but just to give you kind of a little bit more context for density bonuses. So again, in that same spirit, happy to give more detail, but are there any questions about how the current density bonuses operate? Okay, wonderful. I've clearly done an excellent job. All right, so here is kind of a little bit more of what Director Zucchero was talking about earlier. So this, off the top of my head, I can't remember if it's from 2010 or 2011, the most recent update to it, but I think it's actually originally from 1997. It's in your staff report. But, it's time for an update. And council, I think, initially was interested in sort of generally, like, is this creating too out of character, the new construction, is it out of character? And then hiring the consultants and saying, first question, like, what does that mean to be out of character? What does it mean to be too big? Is that actually a sentiment that folks in the community have? So that was sort of the initial review phase. And the consultants went into a fair bit of detail in their diagnostic report about that, which is included in your staff packet. But I think a quick summary of some of the things that come up that are most related to historic preservation, concern about preserving the diversity of housing stock was something that they heard, preserving the small historic scale of some of these neighborhoods, some of these structures, a lot of interest in having porches on houses and having porches be close to the street. Some concern, at least a little bit of concern about the fact that, housing prices are increasing and that there is at least the perception that there are larger houses on larger lots and that the new construction that comes in is too large. Again, that's subjective, but certainly something that I think the diagnostic report shows at least some community members and some stakeholders share. They also noted that there's a prohibition on creating new smaller lots. That relates to the underlying zoning. But somebody could not create today a 3,500 square foot lot if they wanted to. The zoning would prohibit that. So that was something that the consultants also noted. And they go into great detail as that as well. We can talk a little bit more about that if you'd like. But if you didn't take a look, I think the way that they kind of summarize the three, what they heard, what they observed, and then what the code allows or says is really helpful here too. So you can start to see the gap between what the community, as they've represented it, right, wants to see, and then what the code might actually be allowing or facilitating or incentivizing. Okay, so I am actually going to summarize the minutes because I do think they're pretty helpful, just in case you didn't get a chance to look. So there are a few of the things that came up from the consultant side that we haven't really talked about. And we talked about the new smaller lots, but they also talked more about the regional development and the fact that their estimation of the trends is that we would potentially see larger buildings over time, that what's happening now is sort of the beginning of the trend. And so really attending to that issue as they see it is an important piece. They also noted, I believe in their diagnostic report, this is spoken about a little bit greater length in the meeting minutes, a dissatisfaction with demolition stays. That's technically a separate code, but thought I'd point it out here regardless. I'd also say that, there are mixed opinions on the question of character of new construction. Not everybody agrees, of course, on whether, new builds are within character and what character really means. And then they also, again, they talked about these larger trends of, having an oversupply of large houses along the Front Range and sort of an undersupply of, diverse sizes and smaller homes, and sort of articulating that not just in Louisville, but sort of more broadly. And then the other kind of two groups. So we had one speaker from the public who may or may not be currently present. You'll have to go back in the minutes and see. Anyway, and then also the commissioners. So we had some concern that incentivizing, that if smaller lots were allowed, that they might accidentally sort of backdoor incentivize scrapes for people to subdivide and build 2 new smaller houses. And then, again, there was this idea that the code as it stands and as the commission's, Planning Commission and Historic Preservation Commission understood it through the diagnostic report, that it felt like a, quote, uphill battle for preservation, that there might be some sort of oppositional efforts going on. There's also sort of a general idea that smaller homes might be of interest in the future, but also that design and aesthetics were an important part of this process. So it's not just about the size, but it's also kind of a little more about the look and feel. And then also concern about, bringing existing homes into compliance and making it easier to develop with existing homes, which is certainly something that, staff and the consultants have talked about. And then, so from the public, we heard, that landmarking and preservation are really separate issues and with separate standards, and that design in the code can be a little, I think it's fair to say, sort of a little tricky, should maybe not be part of the code or should be carefully adapted as part of the code. And then also a note that, its size is not sort of one concept. You can have a kind of a large scale building that is massed in such a way that it appears smaller, and so that perception is also a part of the size conversation. It's not just straight square footage and lot coverage. So I think I'm trying to represent those sentiments accurately. So here's the sort of last Q&A, and I think, not to put pressure on you all, but it would be really helpful if there are any pieces that you think, I really want an answer to this question in order to understand what I think matters in a potential, change to the density bonuses, for example, something like that. What more information would you like? That would be really helpful for staff to understand. And then also, if you do tonight have any general concerns or questions or ideas about how zoning could help or hinder the historic preservation program specifically, that would also be of interest and very helpful.
All right, thank you.
I have a question about that. I didn't see a link to the new report from the consultants in this page on the website. Did you have to go to the packet to see what they had updated, what they'd done?
Yeah, it's an attachment to.
Okay, because I went to
Yeah.
the planning department website and looked at the proposal or the work that was done by the consultants on this zoning, and it's 2 years old. So we are looking at something different than what's on the website, you're saying?
Well, I think that what that diagnostic report is from 2021. We don't have an updated one.
But what you put in the package, it's the same old one?
It's the same old one.
Okay, I
Yep.
see.
Yep.
Okay,
That's
well-
still sort of the engagement for the
Okay.
project.
Then that's one of the things was that the consultants that were hired, they did a pretty good survey of talking to residents in Louisville about what they liked about the town, the old town, the smaller buildings, the nature of it, and what they found wrong with it and how we could make that happen. So maybe before we provide much input on what you do differently, maybe we need some kind of summary report from them again. But they found that because, well, the zoning that existed in the old town was applied after the old town was built, and was very inconsistent with it. That if the fire had affected the old town, on the majority of the lots, people wouldn't be able to rebuild their houses because the zoning was appropriate for a subdivision somewhere, not an old historic town. And that was what the proposals were to change. So anyway, did I get that about right?
Can I ask an access question just real quick? I'm happy to provide that report again. I'm also happy to link directly to the YouTube where they actually give their presentation.
Oh.
Would it be helpful for everybody for me to put that together? Okay, sort of couple nods. Okay, this is easy for me to do, so you can definitely see that because it is out there.
I would at least provide that, and everybody can choose if it would be helpful or not at that point. Also, some of things that I noticed coming through neighborhoods and everything is the scale of the front portion. And like you said, you can step things back and go through other ways to introduce yourself to a neighborhood that's smaller in scale, or the structures are smaller in scale, and then enlarge as you go back. I understand everybody's desire to have a larger, more bang for your buck for home or whatever else you're going to do and have room to grow. I'm not saying to go this route, but some sort of almost like a volume or a massing study as like I guess I would just say in the historic overlay district, if you had some sort of a massing study that went, 3 houses down on one side and 3 on another, or something of that sort, where you could start to have a certain volume or understanding of what your context is, might help not have every building just be, what can I maximize on this lot, which is kind of what seems to go through. So unfortunately, if you go that route, it takes a lot more time, a lot more consideration, getting more input, and then it becomes problematic for some people to come into a new area and design anything for it as well.
That is a lot of what those consultants went into, though. They felt that with the current zoning and the prices involved, you almost could not build a McMansion. That with the way things were set up, you really had to build a big house. I'm not totally sure about the logic of how they got to that, but that was the way they stated it.
Sort of in keeping the same question, one of the points that struck me on the material was the idea of batches or the bachelor quarters in the backs of some of the homes. And I don't know how our current zoning is addressing that, if we are still allowing a new construction of a secondary residence on the same property. I imagine right now it's dealt with by setbacks and massing. I just don't know if there should be any special treatment of allowing a secondary residence. And I get into the Airbnb and rental problems and all the other can of worms that opens. I just wonder if there is some opportunity to deal with some of the equity and inclusion issues with some smaller residences there. And again, not to be really addressed unless there's some specifics about it, but.
Yeah, so I think I would definitely will note that interest, and if there are others on the commission that also are interested in that, I'd put that down. But I think it's a use distinction. I don't know if Rob, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I had a couple comments.
You just looked eager. Go ahead.
Yep, I was. So on the AD, so the accessory dwelling unit question, I think it's good to know what our code allows now. We do allow what we call guest houses within our code, which means you can have a guest suite. And you see a lot of those in Old Town. You see them over new garages especially, or even old garages. They're not allowed to have cooking facilities. And then the use question is, you can't rent them out. They're truly supposed to be for guests under the rule of our code. We are in a process of outside of this issue. We are under a process at the city of exploring accessory dwelling units citywide. And so that could play into this. So I think, but I did want to kind of reframe this. I know it's a little confusing because this project started a long time ago, and that's why I wanted to kind of create that context, is, when we were asked initially by city council, there's concern about the character of Old Town. So we're looking at other things about EDI and some other things and affordability, but primarily, this project started out to be about character. And so we have this code that we've had for several decades. There's some sentiment that it's not adequately addressing the character issue. So primarily what we're trying to do is say, okay, what's the existing character? How can we create zoning as best we can? It's never going to be perfect. So that when new builds and additions come in, they, to the best of our ability, they are within the character of the existing historic housing stock. So that's one issue. within that zoning code, and this is all administratively done usually, as you know, this doesn't come before historic preservation. I think one of the primary things is there are 2 bonuses built into this code, and we're working with the consultants now about preservation and landmarking bonuses. They're 2 very separate, distinct bonuses. And I think some of the feedback that would be really helpful as we continue to work with our consultants from you all is we have this current preservation bonus. You only have to preserve a small front of the facade. You don't have to restore it to a historic form. And then you get more density. You know, that means more FAR, more lot coverage. The landmark bonus is different because you can control that development. You don't look at the bonus, but you look at the alteration certificates. Do you think the current structure is adequate? Do you think, we need to address those 2 issues in any way? I think that specific feedback could be really helpful as we continue to work with the consultants. I will also say that we decided to do this with you this evening so that you could just get up to speed on the current zoning more than getting a ton of feedback, because when we worked with City Council in 2021, they wanted us to come back and get some more direction from them. So we're working on that. Once we do that, we are going to work with the consultants on some final recommendations, and then we'll run that through this commission. So we'll actually have a specific proposal in front of you that you can comment on, both for the Old Town overlay and the preservation bonus and the landmark bonus. So any feedback you can give relative to that would be especially helpful.
So to that point, I would say that, I'm not quite sure how it evolved, 'cause it's before my time on this commission or even living in Louisville, that the HPC doesn't review the landmark and preservation bonus applications, so city, council must do that. That doesn't allow us to kind of advise towards more historically sensitive additions. So I'm not sure if that's something that's being considered having changed, where we can review those applications, but that almost is getting ahead of ourselves because the density bonuses seem like they need to be reconsidered at this time. A lot of the feedback that we're getting is that these are concerns to people, that there's these larger structures being built, and that they're kind of both square footage and the FAR aren't quite in character. If that's kind of what the initial intent was for us to look at and maybe even undertake this study, those bonuses have been around. And it's interesting, like Amelia said, to maybe see potentially that they're not quite maybe used as much as we would think, but I think they're still used enough, those bonuses, that they do change the character to some degree. So I would like to at least just kind of put out there that I think those should be considered again as we move forward.
I don't think we should have preservation bonuses. I think I think the problem for me is that our bonus as far as lot coverage is one of our main incentives. And so by having that as part of our landmark program is a huge benefit for homeowners. But then if there's another option where they can have a similar bonus but not have any strings attached, I think undermines our program. So I feel pretty strongly that we should not have the preservation bonus at all. I'm obviously open to opinions on that and discussion as to why we do have 2 options, but I just think, I think already we're on a slippery slope with additions and alterations to our homes. Like, that's something we struggle with constantly, is we want to give people larger homes to make them more modern, all that, but then we're on this slippery slope of how big is too big, how do we, we're not really in charge of the new design, we only have so much say over that, so it's already a hard thing to navigate, but then having a whole other option where homeowners don't even have to necessarily go through us as far as design guidelines. They can just look at kind of the code as far as roof and general mass and scale and FAR or whatever. And then I just think it just makes it, there's just, and then if they go through the process of getting the preservation bonus and then decide that they actually want to change the whole part that they save, they can. Like, there's nothing that we can do because it's not landmarked. It's not a, so I think that's one of my main concerns is, should we even have this? And I'd be really interested in what the consultants, how they feel about that, what they see, especially like with other cities, entities, like, does this happen? To me, it just seems like it completely undermines our program. And so why would you go through all of our hoops of strings and guidelines and requirements when you can just go this way and get the larger, you have to obviously keep something, but you don't have anyone. So that's my main concern, I think. Yeah, and as far as the new builds in general, I think it's really hard. I don't know, because with historical preservation, that's one of the things is, from the national standard, it's new buildings in general should be distinct and different, whether it's a new building in a historic area or like a addition. Like, we don't want to create false history. So I think that's also really hard, because obviously a lot of the more modern looks very different. We know that that's not a historic home, but it's also fairly jarring. So I don't know how to navigate that, but I think if there's a way that we can figure that out, it would be helpful, but I don't know what that looks like. So that's not a strong opinion. It's just kind of I don't know. But I think it's important that we figure it out, because we're only going to have more and more of an issue with it, because it's becoming a lot more common.
I'll just be really quick if I can. I think just from your quick summary that you went through, and just general knowledge of what the bonus structure is right now, I think it's broken. I think it needs to be fixed and it should be looked at. But again, I wouldn't speak too much more to it until studying up a little bit more on my end. It seems like you're giving the historic side of things a little bit of a lever, and then you're totally taking any sort of bonus or anything away from that portion as you put in the other bonus structure. That being said, also looking at, just jumping back to what we were talking about before as far as ADUs, I know like Boulder in particular has started allowing people to rent out ADUs as well as build them. And I think that's one of their ways of saying, hey, we're built out, we're dense, we have nowhere else to go. How do we find these other smaller areas, smaller home type setups that could be actually rented out to somebody that works in an area that might not be able to afford to be there. And this area is quickly getting there. I mean, if it's not already super surpassed that. I think it should be looked at as well. And if nothing else, on a affordable housing side of things, I know Boulder does do a incentive to allow you to build even a larger portion if you're able to make that into an affordable housing contract, that you would only rent it out for a certain percentage of market rate versus a market rate one. I just think you should look around a little bit. I think they've been trying to address that and try to come up with other smaller, this is, instead of subdividing a lot to get 2 smaller homes, which I do think would encourage people to just immediately scrape and do it, because there's an economic lever and factor there. But that should be looked at as well, and short and sweet on my end.
Now, to be clear, the auxiliary dwelling unit evaluation effort is separate from the zoning, right?
Yeah, that's a different use question that we're going to be talking to the community about this year. I think the one thing to be cognizant of, though, is, when you're looking at the physical form on the lot, you know, do we want to accommodate ADUs? It may make some sense, whether they're guest houses or ADUs. We don't want to create something that maybe precludes good design for ADUs as well.
Be clear too, in the Old Town, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a different allowance on the east side of the Old Town and the west side of the Old Town. There are two different zoning districts, right?
There are two different underlying zoning districts, but the overlay covers both of them, and kind of the lot size dictates the current zoning.
What is it, RML and something?
Yeah, RL, RM. Yep.
I mean, I think too with lot division, I think it could motivate people to scrape, but I think one of the hindrances too is if it's like an example that we had where it couldn't be divided in the right proportions to the code. I think that like having just different flexibility with lot division in Old Town overlay would make a big difference too, where, you know, if you have to have a specific dimension of width or whatever for each parcel, then you would have to scrape both. But if the city can say like, oh, your Old Town overlay, this one can be larger, you can have a smaller one, like that way you can keep the first and add on a second one. I think just being more flexible in that way, I think would be a good way around that. Because I think Old Town was dense historically, and so I don't think that would lose character. And if anything, it would allow smaller homes to be added and people to, you know, utilize their property, but also keep their original structure on the property. So, yeah, but I think flexibility is huge with lot division and overlay in the Old Town.
I would agree. I think if that's something that could be looked into, that flexibility would allow for, right, more smaller homes that would stay within the character. You know, as Jocelyn mentioned, having sort of a zone you look at, we've got some bigger homes, but also if we can encourage smaller homes to keep that character and more affordable, that could really be key. On sort of a different topic, as we kind of keep moving forward, the alteration certificates for the language there for landmarked properties could potentially be looked at. 'Cause as written now, as we've talked about, requires for just that kind of very relatively small portion of the front facade to be preserved, which isn't really keeping with national standards for preservation. So re-exploring that language to allow for a larger percentage to be preserved, you know, if possible, but that would be part of the bonus program, right? So we'd maybe get rid of that completely.
So just a small
Let's
point
clarify.
of clarification. You add to it, but so the alteration certificate, so that's where it gets a little confusing. So the way that the Old Town overlay is written is there's a section that says to qualify for a preservation or a landmark bonus, the project has to meet those 6 criteria up there. Then there's a separate section that says, by the way, landmarks are actually also, in addition, subject to the alteration certificate. So the language in the alteration certificate, so a separate part of the code, is a higher standard, but it doesn't have a percentage associated with it. So it's all sort of a subjective higher standard, which is very much in line with the national, you know, the way that national standards are articulated. But I think when you compare the two, in my philosophizing about why there is the confusion, I think there's a hard number in the preservation bonus language that also happens to mention the landmark bonus. But so that's something that people can sometimes like fall back on. Oh, it's got to be the front 10 feet. But actually, the standard for landmarking conceptually is much higher and really, ideally, is not touching the historic part of the structure at all. So I don't know if that, I'm trying to both capture what it says and then also why it's a little bit confusing and potentially, you know, alteration certificate looking at being a little bit more specific, maybe we can consider that alongside. Does that help? Okay.
I don't know if you want to take public if there's any public comment, you can do that as well on a discussion item if you're having discussion direction.
Sure. Would anyone like to make a public comment about this? And if you'll just state your name and address for us.
Andy Johnson, 920 Lincoln Avenue. So I'll speak from that perspective. Okay. We joke about this all the time. I believe that commissioners, city council, and staff should go through the application process for a new home, an addition, and historic preservation. And I think that it's super important because if you don't, you are not a user of the program. And if you're not a user of the program, it's really hard to implement the program. And I think it would be an incredibly valuable exercise. I've been here since '99, and I've been working in Louisville since '03 on these programs. It drives me crazy when people come up and kind of put credibility into the amount of years that they've been here, but I have watched many versions of you before me and who I've presented to, and we've had a lot of different discussions, and there have been a lot of different takes on this exact topic. There have also been a lot of different takes on historic preservation, and so, historic preservation and the Old Town Overlay, while they are separate, one's a zoning document, one's historic preservation, they are too often looked at independently. And I don't believe that the Old Town Overlay can go without your input. So I hope when staff asks you for this input, you take it seriously because this is super important. And here's why. So your job is historic preservation. And there are objective standards set up by the Department of the Interior that we get to follow. You're a historic preservation commission. You are about historic preservation, not home saving. Fundamentally different, and I do not mean to be disrespectful in any way. However, we talk a lot about saving homes. We're preserving homes, and that's different. There's one mindset around preservation where you're valuing all the criteria that you set up for how you decide landmark happens. Home saving is about no change. Philosophically, that is fundamentally different. And so I think it's really important that you guys get aligned with what your job is. Sorry, that was probably very forward. The things that go into play with the Old Town Overlay, let's start with the roof rule. I've had maybe 3 different ways to interpret the roof rule over the years that I've been doing this with different staff members. It's all fair, and I can see the reasonability of it, but we've done it differently in so many different ways with the 80-20 rule. And if you don't know what that is, you should learn it and figure out how hard it is to do. The far and lot discussion, the minute someone comes to me with an Old Town Overlay project and then they say, oh, what about historic preservation? Immediately I have a 2-hour discussion because it is so complicated to go through the calculations, to talk about all the opportunities. And believe me, it's a great discussion. And I am so proud and happy to have it because I'm a big believer in our program, but it is complicated and it's very nuanceical. And it's got little funny loopholes. For example, far and lot, if you have just that perfect lot size, I'll find your loophole where you can do less of a home than if you were 5 square feet higher. And it's super weird how it happens, but I've been doing this long enough to where I've found those weird little things that kind of make the formula break down. So density bonuses. This is a discussion that you guys should not be excluded from because it directly involves preservation. Keep in mind that the Old Town Overlay and the Historic Preservation Program were born at the same time, right? These are 25+ year programs that have done a great job living its life, but we have different expectations. We talk about different things now. We have outlived some of the reasons why they're there. Density bonuses came into play because we didn't have a lot of money to give to these projects. We have a lot of money to give to these projects, and we still talk about adding more, right? Because cost of construction is so high. What's meaningful in giving someone, an incentive for historic preservation if it doesn't meet their financial goals with a project or to get them over the hump? Back then, that density bonus was a big deal, right? Because you could all of a sudden take a small lot and build something. So we may have outlived density bonuses entirely. We may just say that we just don't need them anymore. You have to be a part of that discussion. I think it's super important. And it's important to know when something's outlived its lifetime. You have to know the history of it to know why it was created and to figure out if it has any meaning anymore. And I'm going to bounce back and forth, and Rob will probably cut me off in my 3 minutes, but stays. Stays is another one that has outlived its lifetime. A 180-day stay 25 years ago, that was a big deal. We did simpler drawings. We had quicker permit times. We had lots of things where we could go through a permit and expect to start building from like a client coming to someone like me to starting construction in less than 6 months. No problem. And it was a big deal to be held up. It felt punitive and all that. And the threat of a stay is more effective than the actual stay. And that's important to know. The 90-day stay, not to diminish what happened tonight, won't have an effect on, if they decide to move forward or not. And so you need to decide if the stay is a good mechanism to influence someone to really consider the program. And then you need to decide how you integrate with that process. The first time I ever had a stay on a project, one of the commissioners sat down with me and we designed the project. And it ended up being a wonderful project. It was really a cool experience. That's a different level of engagement that obviously, requires you to have a pretty high level of commitment to, going outside of just sitting at the dais every month. And I'm not suggesting that that's a good idea. I think the discussion around preservation. Landmark is something that is defined by the Department of the Interior. We have this whole other category called preservation that can be used and gamed so many different ways that you wonder, what are we really trying to do? Back then, it made a difference. These buildings, keep in mind, Louisville was not built intentionally. It was subdivided. It was surveyed and neighborhoods were created. But these homes weren't built here. They were built on the mines and moved in a lot of cases. And then they were modified based on the need of the family as they grew. And some of these homes even came from Lafayette. So we are not an intentional community. We are a community of happenstance. And that's cool. And there's a lot of really rich history in that. However, we didn't mean this town to be this way from its origin. So, I think this idea of trying to save every building is really hard. And these buildings have a 50-year lifespan, and we're looking at 118 years, right? These are tired buildings, and they are really hard to save. And I think that really the discussion and the meat of this is philosophically, where do you align with what's new? Because the Old Town overlay is not only about what's old, but it's also what's new. And you can't avoid the new coming in, but we can have a discussion about what does that mean for our community, and what does that mean for the scale of our downtown, and the thing that I've heard a lot about tonight, the character of downtown. If you really want to talk about character, talk about how you're going to work with the new. Because the old is easy. We've got it, and we can see it, and we can work with it. And we've done that over the number of years that I've been working with some of you on a number of homes, where we've recreated history, we've celebrated what's there, and have had different degrees of success stories. Talk about the new. Figure out where you're at philosophically with what that looks like with the Old Town overlay. And then the last thing I'll say, well, actually, two last things. Too large is a very difficult discussion, a very dangerous discussion to get into. We are not in the business of deciding what's too large. We are in the business of what's best for our community around scale and feeling. It is subjective. However, there are metrics that we can put to it. Too large is not a discussion anybody wants to get into. And that's why the density bonuses are really tricky. And then the last thing I'll say is, Josh, you hit the nail on the head on ADUs. We are so ready for that. We are built out. And we have a housing problem. And our property values have gone so far through the roof. And believe me, I feel guilty for contributing to that in large ways. But that is a good way to help offer our community more opportunities, to engage in a meaningful housing discussion, particularly in downtown. And I think it's most relevant for downtown. Forget about parking. Let's talk about housing and how we can create opportunities for, my kids, your kids, people who need homes that can't afford the $2 million home. So, all right, thank you. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thanks, Andy. You made a lot of good points, and we have a lot to discuss.
Yeah, I was going to throw in too, as far as the ADU, at our Saving Places, they really focused a lot on density also, and density being sustainable and more affordable, equitable, like all those things. So I think there's a lot of, and that was specific to historic preservation. So I think if we need to dive deeper into that at some point, like that's something we can kind of pull out of our toolbox as far as how density is actually beneficial to a community. So any other specific? So I guess next steps as far as, because I think a lot of this is as far as, like how do we deal with the new, or how would this commission even be a part of that next step?
Yeah, so that's where, Director Zakira mentioned this before, the draft ordinance will give you actually something to look at, and that would be, I think, at least the minimum of the next piece, to comment on that as part of the hearing process for the new code. So that's the quick and, answer. I think also it's certainly fair for you all to spend some time thinking and send me additional emails. I can share those with the consultants, any kind of way that you want to continue to think on these things and send them our way. You are representatives of the community as well as members of the HPC, so that would be helpful. And if I may also just say, especially if there's information that you'd like us to dig into. So for example, the question on, the relationship between density and preservation, or, potentially what is the rate of adoption for density bonuses, things like that. So I'd love to try to get ahead of that, and I don't want to show up at the next hearing where we've really got something to tear into, and you're like, well, can't really make a decision without this, so try to get ahead of that. So emails are here tonight is helpful too.
Yeah, and I can just say that definitely any information you can find on the percentage of homes that have used the preservation bonus would be helpful, just as far as kind of what we're up against or how it's affected potentially landmarked homes that could have been landmarked and weren't, or whatever. I think that would be helpful. I don't know how easy that is, but that'd be helpful.
This has been very helpful.
Yeah, and maybe like I don't know, any of the lot division kind of thing. I don't feel like we've had a lot of those come through here specifically, but
Yeah, and I think what I heard some maybe differing it was just individual discussions, but one is if you preserve a home or landmark a home, you know, the ability to divide a lot, maybe if it's of a certain size. And I also heard that there's concern that without preservation of an existing home on the lot, it could actually disincentivize preservation because of the economics of it. So I think I'm hearing that it could be a potential bonus type concept, kind of putting all of that together. But again, that was just individual comments. And you know, we'll come back with, the point isn't to come back with a complete finished draft. The point is to have a draft so that you have something to react to and discuss. And then we'll certainly take that input and, you know, try to craft something that is and again, like Mr. Johnson said, this is very much about the old landmarking's landmarking.
Right.
This is about new construction, either new homes or new additions,
Right.
is what this is supposed to affect. So this will, you know, when we come back to you, hopefully we'll get some good discussion. We can continue to revise and revise and revise until we have something that we take through the hearing process. It's overdue. We do want to definitely get it done this year. We have a lot of other big projects to work on, so we're very motivated to, over the next few months, trying to get this through the hearing process.
all right. And I guess too, just making sure that we have ample time to kind of review things before everything's finalized. Because I feel like it was a long time ago, and then like it was kind of radio silence, understandably. But
Right.
Just making sure that
When we
have
come,
time
yeah.
to make comments and kind of yeah.
When we come back to you, we'll try to have a very complete discussion. Certainly, if you feel like you need more than one meeting, we can accommodate that, because I know it's a lot to
Right.
dig into.
Yeah. This is very good though. So, and I agree, like the overlay, Old Town overlay and general zoning are very much connected, like to have, and I think that was something when the preservation bonus, when I first heard about it, I was like, wait a second. And that was where it was kind of like this realization that something else was happening on this other, you know, realm. And so I think having these much more cohesive and like working together instead of not against each other, but just knowing how the other one works better so that we can make Old Town just more cohesive, and whether it's new or old or whatever, like it just definitely needs to be coherent together. So, all right, any other final pieces of this? All right. So our next item is an applicant presentation. We have these from time to time on previous projects that we've approved, and we'll have applicants come and just kind of give updates on them. So this is 809 Main, and the applicant will do the presentation. So we'll have, sometimes it's like a project update, sometimes it's an HSA update, like they'll just go through their HSA so we can kind of see the photos and understand like what's happening with the structure. And then that can often like help us as far as approving more funds or kind of any alterations that come about or whatever. And I think you have to state your name and address again.
Andy Johnson, DAJ Design, 922A Main Street. You can tell I'm a little passionate. I love where I live. I do love this program. I'm not buttering anybody's bread. I think we have an amazing staff. I think you guys do a great job. Thanks for listening to me. I had this effect on my kids. They would have been out of here a long time ago. So All right, so I asked Amelia if I could do a project update. I figured that was a huge grant application that was awarded to this relatively small building, but an important one on Main Street. So I wanted to give you all an update. It's been kind of going on a while, right? Y'all are probably like, what the heck? Let me tell you what's going on. So for people who are new, this is a historic photo that we're basing our new building on. This is what's there. We're all familiar with it. It's not awesome, but it's gonna be. These are our elevation studies showing existing, new. Just this is more for the benefit of those who didn't get to see it the first time. This is a skinny site. This is 22 feet wide by 150 feet long. Okay, so we knew it'd be challenging. We didn't know how challenging, but now we do. So when we preserved the first 25 feet, that's the original building. And it's cool because we actually really got like a lot of confirmation that that truly was the structure when we started kind of pulling some of the old building away. So that's what we worked on. And then everything past this blue line is this new addition that is intended to stay kind of back away from the front, right? So we wanted the front to have that very strong original presence of the building on Main Street. And so these are some of our 3D massing studies that we did, that we presented to you and to council. You can see the new 2-story addition in the back, big rooftop deck, opens up to the front, keeps the music pointing east, not towards the neighbors. Couple other views. View from the south looking back, so just, kind of a refresher. We ended up putting together some signs. We wanted to make sure that we could present this to the community with some proper renderings. We did do a door panel, which if you look at the front, it's right in the very middle of the building. And so the far image to the right is the door panel. Amelia was great to provide us with a QR code so you could go right to the program. We have a picture of the plaque that's sitting in my office that we can't wait to have on the building, and then collected a bunch of images from the Historical Museum that Bridget provided us with a little section that Kim and then Amelia edited for the sign. So trying to do a little PR for the project and for the program. Connor Lambricht, who's one of my new employees at the office, put this together for the project. So really lucky to have someone with some great graphic design skills. Obviously, we have to have a little bit about leasing. We want to make sure that this gets filled. But this is providing some character for what we're trying to achieve with this building. Okay, so what are the challenges? If that picture doesn't sum it up, I don't know what does. So obviously we had a brutal winter, super hard to build, lots of delays. Literally every Wednesday we got shut down. So we had like 2 to 3 days a week that we could build. The neighboring building presented more challenges than I'm even going to go into tonight, but obviously all these buildings in downtown have significant drainage issues and quality of building issues. So obviously 809 Main is now going to be starting to pull its weight in terms of the quality of the construction. So the excavation was very challenging. The shoring efforts that were initially planned had to be completely redesigned. And a lot of it was, given that that's a national landmark next door to 801, it's a 2-story building, it's got a lot of load. We had to kind of pivot and go through a whole new shoring exercise for that building to be as responsible as we could for the excavation along that building. So you can see that this state here kind of stayed that way for a while. There was a significant shoring exercise of the interior. Here's what we found. So when we went in and kind of uncovered the interior, The framing looked great, actually. The wall framing was phenomenal. The foundation that we were expecting to see, that we thought we saw in the crawl space, turned out to be basically like a veneer of almost like kind of a, we called it prehistoric shotcrete. It was just kind of like stabilizing the dirt. It's all built on, this whole building was built on dirt, set on dirt, and then the whole back portion was all built like a fence. It was all piers. It is amazing that this building did not fall down. So what you see in the images right up in here, you're gonna see a lot of dirt below kind of what looks like a foundation. However, that foundation, the concrete that you see there is actually the drainage pan that got poured, and it kind of made its way under the building to sort of look like a foundation, but it wasn't holding anything up. Not only that, the whole front facade had no foundation. Truly, it's amazing that it's standing up. And Milo Construction, to their credit, has done an amazing job making sure that this building is very stable. So we ended up coming in and underpinning with a series of shoring piers on the inside. That was not part of the plan. And by the way, I'm not coming to do this to ask for more money. So just in case that was a worry. The layers that you see on the side are basically kind of strata of construction and the soils. One of the interesting things is that there is a fairly substantial layer of what looks like coal. It's actually ash from incinerators. So some of you may know this already, but the reason they would do that is it stopped termite damage, because it basically kept any sort of insects wanting to come up. And trust me, this building, if any building in Louisville had termites, it'd be this one. Because of the drainage that we found, lots of failures in the drain pan, particularly on the 813 side of the property, that were finding fissures through the soil and coming through the crawl space. They had a radon fan that was basically exhausting that crawl space continuously, because when it went off, the moisture built up so much that like a whole mushroom farm developed underneath. So when they pulled this building apart, it literally crumbled, and it was just spores everywhere. It was really gross. Some shots now. So what if you went by there today, or if you went by there last week, you would see the image on the left. This is them finally with the shoring done, working on setting up the footings, getting the formwork in place, preserving the soil on the 813 side, so the north side of the property where all the orange tarps are, preserving that 45-degree angle cut for the excavation. And now today, you would see them basically tying off the rebar for the walls, and we'll start to see this thing go vertical here soon. So it has been a long process. It's been a super long winter. Anybody in the building industry has just been dying if you haven't been out of the ground with your project. So we're really happy that we're heading in the right direction. Of course, it's Old Town. Of course, the neighbor's sewer line's on ours. Of course, there's a weird tree growing right in the weirdest spot possible. So all these things have been anticipated, and we're just kind of working through it. But I think hopefully in the next couple months, I'll bring a presentation to you again, and then maybe towards the end in the summer, towards the end of June is our completion date. Be fun to do a ribbon cutting, a little quick tour, and give you the good news on how everything went. If you have any questions, happy to answer it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you have any time lapse or anything of this?
No.
No.
However,
I've been asking for
it's
that.
getting set up.
All right.
Yeah, as soon as that wall gets poured and the block starts going up, we'll do it. honestly, it's been so long. That time lapse would be a big yawn at this point.
It might be, but
Yeah.
you can just speed up the play.
I do have a lot of photos.
That's good.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the amount of the grant in relation to the overall project and what the grant allowed the owners to do differently? What did it motivate them to do, if anything, differently?
Great question. It motivated them to do this. This wouldn't happen otherwise. And honestly, it was, something that staff and I talked about. Honestly, like many of you, I just got tired of seeing the building sitting there for years without use, and knowing the building as well as I did prior to the first, Waterloo space and then its vacation, and how kind of bad it was. I kind of knew that it wouldn't go anywhere if there wasn't some stimulus. So we had a great discussion. Staff was awesome. Like, it was very collaborative. It was actually very brief too. It was like, what do you think? Let's try it. So I pitched it to Tebow without knowing whether we could do it or not. And to Stephen Tebow's credit, he goes, sure. If you can demonstrate that we can do that in a meaningful way, and this becomes a project that, I can really hang my hat on, I'm all in. And, he's at a point in his career where I think, he's really looking at legacy projects that contribute to the community. This is not a money-making project for him. He obviously does well with all of his work, but, this is not one that you would have a developer endeavor. This is a labor of love. So the historic preservation program was the stimulus for it to even be discussed. So it was the gateway for the idea. And then in terms of the funds, what it allowed us to do is properly shore the nationally the building that's on the National Register. It allowed us to do this project responsibly within a very tight context, and it's going to allow us to basically take that whole front 25 feet, which is really our main awareness of that building on Main Street, and really bring it back to, its original character, including the wood shingles and the whole storefront. So keep in mind, this is a core and shell project. It's not finished. There will be a tenant finish included. So this is a $1.8 million project, and we were just a little south of about $500,000. Yeah. You're welcome.
And I think just seeing the photos, definitely confirm that our extraordinary circumstances, were well met in this project.
Very extraordinary.
So, yeah. But, it was a big project for us, and it's a commercial project, and, but I think we don't have a lot of commercial properties, and so this is a very meaningful one as far as downtown. So yeah, it was a big decision for us for sure to do it.
I'm interested because we're looking at some other things, but to the extent we can use grants to motivate different behaviors, I think that's a wise use of our grants. And I think this is a perfect example of that.
Okay, well, in closing, on behalf of Tebow and DAJ Design, thank you for being partners in the process. Obviously, we want to see this finished up successfully, but you all played a very important role. So thank you, and be happy to answer any questions along the way. I think everybody knows how to get a hold of me. More than happy to come and present anytime if there are significant markers along the way.
And you said you have a finished date in June?
I know.
That's fast. Okay. Yeah. And then the tenant would do the finishing, so this would just be the actual building. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so our next item is our work plan and subcommittee updates. It's just kind of seeing where we are. It's already second quarter.
Indeed, okay. Okay, so the one or sort of two pieces that came up from the subcommittees. One was an HPC training video, which was linked in your agenda. I think that I would love to pause and give a moment to the training commissioners, Linda and Keith, if there's anything that you'd like at this point to let folks know about that link, or if we should circle back on that, but we included it in the agenda.
I thought you were raising your hands. I was like, what do you? Yeah, I think we said, and some of it is dependent on our schedule for the next meeting, but probably watch it and have some sort of discussion next meeting, you think, or 2 meetings from now. I guess that's the main question is, do we want, like, it's assigned, we just have a brief discussion kind of thing next meeting, or do we want 2 months to review it? And that's a lot of just scheduling. Like, we don't want to overwhelm people with extra work. We obviously already have our subcommittees and our planning things that we're all working on. So just being realistic and not
What's the
putting extra
duration?
pressure. 45 minutes. Yeah. Yeah.
I would just say whether or not to talk about it next one might just be dictated by how much information, what's in front of us already, so.
As far as our next meeting, that's what I was kind of looking to Amelia for too. So,
We got stuff in April and we got stuff in May. So,
and
welcome to the season.
I know. Well, and two, I don't think we're gonna have a whole lot of discussion probably on, this one's just Historical Preservation 101. So maybe let's just watch it. We'll come up with a little questionnaire just to kind of, and maybe in there we can have a place for like, is there anything in this that you want discussion for or need more information or whatever? And we can just go from there.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. We can maybe prepare for everybody to have watched it by April, and then if we have time, we'll discuss it, and if not, we'll identify a couple of things that you'd like to make sure we discuss in May.
Sounds great.
Hedge it like that?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent. So just given the hour, I want to try to be as efficient as possible. And also my computer has died, so now I know 2 hours is my computer's done with the night. So I would just love to go down the list that I don't have in front of me of the subcommittees and see if there's anything, and if y'all are ready, we can have a whole conversation, but ideally I'd love to hear what are the next steps that you need from me or that you need from each other right now so we can get, have another update by the next month for the subcommittees. So can we start over here with Marty? So that would be Linda and Marty on the social media.
Yeah, so we've got the social media started with our Instagram. We've come up with a slogan or a name for our Instagram, which is going to be Louisville Preservation. And now we are brainstorming what our first post will be.
Well, and I think staff is working with communication just to make sure we're all legal and good. We still have to get the final, I think we're good, but we just have to get the final approval.
Yep,
So,
that's right. And I have a meeting with them next week to present what we'd like to do.
Okay.
Okay, Josh, Blue Parrot. Anything that you need from me or that I need from you?
I think the next step is just to get that meeting scheduled.
I think I think it's scheduled for tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow? I was trying to backtrack through it, and I couldn't remember when we got to it, so.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's it. I really think until we cross that bridge, there's nothing else to really push on really hard right now.
Okay, perfect. Gary, anything on downtown business or coloring book or anything?
I noticed that you forwarded the downtown business newsletter item, and thanks for doing that. Gives people an idea of what's going on there, but it's not a big effort. You probably don't have to distribute it every month, but it's there as an example.
I'll
And,
look-
on the coloring book thing, we've scheduled a next meeting. Have had some discussions and I think you're talking to the artist.
Yeah, so I think the artist is preparing 2 drawings that we'll look at in early April when we meet to give feedback on those, but then also how to move forward with the next batch. And Gary got us some write-ups for the captions.
A few of them, yeah.
For the drawings, which Amelia and I will edit, and we're looking forward to reading those. And then we'll get back to you on those.
You look for grammar errors, huh? You teachers.
And Gary, actually, just on the subject of the DBA, if in the future there's questions that you have for people or a goal that you want, I'm happy to continue sharing them, but just let me know if there's something extra that you want me to be doing, or if there's a better way to kind of not overwhelm people, but keep people updated. Just think about that piece and let me know. Okay, Linda, we've already talked, anything to add about social media, training? Chrissy, anything to add about coloring book? And then we have the user experience surveys.
The user experience survey I'll talk about. So the survey questions, working on revising those. I did 1 draft, so we're due to meet in April as well, mid-April, April, yeah. So but then we'll go over those, but you're also working on a different component with Amelia.
Okay, so check the next meeting scheduled, and then review survey questions. I did see those emails. Keith, anything to add for any? Randy? That's right. I'll label it as homework. Randy, anything to add?
So we did kick off the user experience. We did questions and baseline. We've been with finance on the baseline, and we got really narrowed down to 3 sets of accounts over 4 years. So I think we're going to be able to tie out the city numbers and have some pretty good data on grants and how much we've given, how many instances over time. So we'll have a pretty good baseline of what we've done, and it'll be pretty tied out to what we've done financially. So we're waiting on some info from finance, and we're getting back on the questions. So I think we're making good progress.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's see. Other items, we had an alteration certificate for 612 Jefferson Avenue. Here we go. And this is an excerpt of the letters. They look very similar to the demolition reviews. So we cite the code that we're referencing, and we give reasoning for why the subcommittee released. Alteration certificates are just 2 members of the commission. Staff does not have a voting role, unlike in demolitions when we do. And then 1409 courtesy was a demolition review that was released. Happy to answer questions, but just to quickly go through those. And then a couple things about the upcoming schedule. We don't have to talk about this now, but if anybody is interested in that April 7th museum volunteer opportunity, I unfortunately am going to be out of town, so it would be wonderful to have HPC representation if possible. At the very least, I'm happy to give the museum folks some documents. So if you're available on April 7th, you want to do a First Friday art walk, email me or come meet me after the meeting. I'm happy to describe it a little bit more. Staff would provide all the materials. You can do multiple shifts. I think max they're about 3 hours, but that's when things are really going heavy and people are coming in, and that can be kind of fun. We have a regular meeting scheduled for April 17th. We have, when I made this, a probable cause, I think we might have added 1 more item now at this point. And then I also wanted to see if off the cuff, if 5 p.m. is a potential meeting time for an open government training before the meeting, or if that is too early in general. While you're thinking, I can tell you open government training is, how do we make our government proceedings as transparent as possible? So you hear from the city attorney about all of the stuff that I kind of very quickly went over in the training, but all the how we do notice, how we make everything public, why we have to be so annoying about the 2-person maximum piece and not hitting reply all. That's the training, and it's required for HPC, so we're trying to find a time to do it.
Is it a full hour and a half training?
So it's not a full hour and a half. It can start between 5 and 5:30. I would recommend, if possible, starting at 5, getting a little bit of a break between the 5:30 and 6:30 hearing, stretch your legs, and also it doesn't last an hour, having just done this with the BOA. So
I would be more open to the 5:30 time slot and just take my medicine, but that's where I'm at.
fair.
I'm going to be out of town on the 17th.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else out of town?
I'm not out of town, but that particular date, it's harder for me to do that amount of time with other things going on around that. So is everybody required to do that training? Should it be pushed to a different time?
You can do it. You'd have to watch it afterwards, but I think if we had 3 people who couldn't make it, we'd kind of pushing the point of this. So doing it in May is a possibility, and I think maybe what I might try to do is ask the city attorney if he can aim for April to get us the slides so that you can all see those in advance. It's really important stuff, and just having seen it, it's really hard to get it done in an hour, but I am sympathetic, and the time that you give something is the time it will take. So I do understand. So we can plan for a 5:30. I'll explore May and do our best to kind of get it sooner than later for everybody. Okay, I think that's everything from me.
Some of you may know this, but Bridget Bacon, who is our museum services supervisor, announced that she's retiring. Unfortunately, she does all of those incredible social histories that are in the packets. She worked for the city for 19 years, amazing person, amazing supporter of the museum and historic preservation. So we're going to miss her, and the city will be, hiring a new museum supervisor. And Amelia and I are working on, we can never fill those shoes, but we know the value that the museum brings to historic preservation with those write-ups, and we're going to try to figure out how we can keep providing that type of information for your packets.
Wow. Gosh, she started the museum. She is the museum. Huh.
When will her last day be?
June 9th.
All right. Anything else from staff? You good? All right. Our next item is to adjourn. Does anyone have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Recording stopped.